Hi everyone, good morning. Great to be joining you. My name's Paraic Hayes, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about international expansion in 2020 and beyond. Before I begin, just a little bit of background. IDA Ireland is the Irish investment agency. We've been helping companies expand overseas for over 70 years, partnering with companies large and small on hundreds of international expansion projects every year. In the course of our work, we've gained a lot of insight into what works and what doesn't work when companies expand overseas. In fact, we thought we'd seen it all in our 70 years doing this, then 2020 happened. I had our West Coast US team. We work with a lot of the next wave of fast-growing companies who are internationalizing for the first time. And I've been in the US almost 15 years, working on projects across technology and life sciences. And before joining IDA, I was part of a European landing team for a financial services company. So have seen this process from both sides of the desk, as it were. As we know, international expansion is challenging enough, and COVID and the resulting global economic and political uncertainty has added an extra dimension. So today I'd like to run through a few questions that are on the minds of investors at the moment. Does it make sense to expand overseas in the current environment? What are the key things to be aware of, particularly with COVID in mind? And what's some advice to make sure that your expansion goes well? So should companies still consider going international in the current environment? I think the answer to this is yes. International markets are key to a company's growth. Good ideas travel fast, and if you don't pursue that international market share, then your competitors certainly will. The international VC firm Frontline Ventures just published an interesting report based on a survey of 200 software companies that have recently expanded overseas. And they found that by the time a typical company goes public, up to 25 to 35% of their revenues are already coming from outside of the US. So most of this is what is being left on the table by not having an international strategy. Companies are also expanding earlier than ever before, with 55% of expansions happening before Series B. And this is something we're certainly seeing in our work with startup companies here in the US. Europe remains the natural first step for US companies expanding. It's a large, wealthy, tech-savvy, mature market of over 700 million consumers. But it's not an easy nut to crack. It's an ever more complex market, especially for young companies going through this for the first time. You're dealing with different cultures, languages, laws, and regulations across the European bloc. And there's a lot of additional uncertainty in Europe at the moment, both economic, but also regulatory and policy flux with Brexit, changes to data privacy, and other issues to navigate. That's before you add a global pandemic into the mix. In fact, COVID really has upended everything in terms of companies looking at growing internationally. In fact, foreign direct investment is down over 40% since COVID began. We are facing potentially a major global economic recession. So due diligence on overseas locations is really challenging. There is limited travel and site visits happening, and business models and supply chains have completely been upended. So, for example, can I move my products in and out of Europe? Can I move people around? How do I make sure my teams are safe? The good news is that there is also opportunities in this for a lot of companies. So digital transformation has been turbocharged globally. Many industries and companies are booming with more customers overseas than ever before. Cloud software, collaboration tools, e-commerce, healthcare, and life sciences. And remote working is possibly a game changer in terms of a talent play for a lot of companies. There is also, thankfully, a sense that this too shall pass. The Site Selectors Guild, for example, recently did a poll which showed that 61% of companies plan to go forward with their expansion plans in 2021. Locations and partners are also becoming a lot more savvy in allowing for remote due diligence. So for example, at IDA, we've introduced a suite of tools to help companies navigate the process virtually. So for example, virtual site visits. I want to also touch a little bit on remote working because it's a topic that's come up a lot, and the possible advantages of this have really been thrown around a lot at the minute. Many companies are attracted by the possible talent access and the cost savings and the advantages that they see in that. The jury is still out on the long-term productivity levels, but it seems to be working for a lot of companies in the US over the last 6 months. I would put a word of caution on international remote working, though. We are seeing a lot of clients dealing heavily with this topic at the moment, where multinational teams in market have team members who've returned to their home countries during the COVID lockdown. And this has potentially opened up a potential hornet's nest of compliance issues, both for the company and also for the individual. So everything from labor laws and immigration issues and visa uncertainty through to payroll, sales, and also corporate tax liability. So it's certainly something to go into with your eyes open. In-country work from home models can work well if they're managed properly. Shopify is an example of a company that's gotten the balance right. So in 2015, they started their first fully remote EMEA support operation based out of Ireland. It's entirely work from home with no offices, and they've managed this really well. And as a result, seen benefits from this 100% remote process. They've also, by keeping teams in country, they've mitigated that risk of cross-border tax, payroll, labor law, or other compliance issues. And in fact, in the 5 years since Shopify's first foray into international markets, they've grown to become Canada's largest private company, going from 150 employees globally to over 4,000. Lastly, I thought I'd share some advice and best practice we've learned from working with early stage companies internationalizing for the first time over the years. Number one is keep it simple and to move quickly. In the early stages, speed to market really is key. We're seeing smaller landing teams, companies going with a lean startup, then scaling at speed. You can also outsource a lot of the non-essential functions in the early stages. So keep it tight. You don't need offices everywhere. The more you can do from the one hub, the better. So choosing a location where you can find international languages, where you can scale teams quickly, where there's peers on the ground and also not too much red tape is helpful. There's also no point getting tied up in complex tax strategies or legal entities in the initial stages. Focus on getting the business right. Secondly, read the fine print. Watching your step and compliance is really important in international markets. Getting the right advice on the way in issues like European labour law, regulations, works councils, etc. These issues can vary wildly across the European Union, and being aware of these can be really costly if you're not aware of the possible liabilities on the way in. We always advise companies to think, how easily can we get out of this if it doesn't work out? International expansion is also mostly about the people. So hire above what you think you'll need. I guess the number one reason we see for failure is getting the wrong initial hiring strategy to drive the business. Sharp local managers who've done it before are worth their weight in gold. They will bring the local processes, networks, and knowledge with them. So for example, Twitter's first landing team in Europe in 2013 was 3 people. Now there were 3 very highly qualified people who'd done it before with Google, Microsoft, and Blizzard. But they were in a serviced office. But when their business grew and they needed to scale that team in those markets, they were able to do so really effectively and really quickly because they had that know-how. So getting the culture and market mix is key. From Frontline Ventures' recent report, 95% of companies that they surveyed went with a local landing team versus bringing over expats from the US. Also, don't underestimate the soft factors. Things like the quality of a workforce, creativity, and the ease of doing business in a location, for example. These are factors that are less easy to quantify when you're putting together that Excel sheet during your RFI or your due diligence. But it is the difference often between success and failure in the project. Cultural differences, for example, really matter. That local market knowledge and hiring native speakers for dealing with individual markets is really important. Finally, partnering locally with the right people. Don't try to do this alone. I think the number 2 failure we probably see for in these projects is when companies try to take on too much from the US. So choosing reputable partners in market is really important. We are seeing a lot of outsourcers, advisors, PEO firms, and other companies in the US popping up, and not all of them are 100% au fait with all the European jurisdictions that you might want to work in. We have, for example, had some people turned away at airports, having been wrongly advised on the visa that they might need. So if in doubt, get a referral, work with reputable companies. And I think networks like this at Softland are really helpful in helping to take the risk out of that choice. So finally, kind of some of my takeaways would be, look, I think companies that want to be successful need to also do so in international markets. So going global is not really a choice anymore. If you want to be successful and grow as a business, it's almost a case of go global or go home. There has unfortunately arguably never been a more uncertain or difficult time to do this. But the good news is the benefits are there if you navigate it right, and there is lots of support available to help along the way. For example, you're very welcome to check out IDA's Land and Expand playbook, which provides a lot of practical advice for companies expanding internationally. So thank you. I'll leave you with one final piece of advice. Ronald Reagan's famous quote about the most dangerous 9 words in the English language does not apply when it comes to international expansion. Sometimes the government actually is here to help. Lots of locations are actively supporting and incentivizing foreign direct investment. So if a country or state isn't bending over backwards to support you to be part of your success, then you should consider whether it's the right location for your business. So do contact your friendly neighbourhood economic development agency, but we obviously suggest that you start by talking with Ireland. Thank you very much.